This is the second part of our interview with Felice Dimartino, and in it, she will talk about her two shared death experiences. I was impressed with how much care the universe holds our lives and our hearts. Welcome to the Afterlife Files, where we investigate near-death experiences, shared death experiences, and how they affect you. Unlike podcasts that are just stories, we will give you a heads up on what to look for in our conversation, and then after the interview, stick around. We'll help you make sense of those accounts so you can incorporate the insights into your life. I think you'll find that once having your most profound questions answered, living life in the physical is filled with more peace and joy. A shared death experience is a rare thing. To have two is unique, and then to have the two of them relate to each other is extraordinary. Here's what to look for. In the first SDE, Felice is with her grandfather in the non-physical, where he reaches down into physical matter reality to assist his wife in making her transition. In the second, Felice is with her father in the physical as he reaches up to gain assistance from his relatives wanting to assist him in making his transition. These two shared death experiences show what it is like to be on both ends of the passage from the physical to the non-physical world. And the knock is the way they come?
Well, a knock. So when I had my shared death experience, wait, first I have to do one thing. Becky Carroll.
I was just capturing what it is. We need to do an intro.
Becky Carroll is who I was referring to, but I said, Becky, can I mention your name? And then I didn't. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the knock.
Do you want to capture this as part of the interview?
Well, you can, sure. Yeah.
Okay, then let's do that.
Okay.
4, 3, 2, 1. Felice, welcome back. We are so glad to have you again here for part 2.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So we're talking about shared death experiences this time instead of your near-death experience, which we did in part 1. So tell us the story.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you the story. And I also, so I don't forget, when I read some of what you wrote in one of the intros to the HemiSync, I think it was Meeting Your Guides, you said your guides can come to you in humorous ways sometimes. And I forgot the example that you gave. And it occurred to me just yesterday, I think. I was like, oh, so as we know, I got literally knocked off my feet when this huge pickup truck hit me going 30 miles an hour. And in my shared death experience, there was a knock, and which you'll hear about. And it's happened a few times since then when I've had to make decisions, like, and I go to sleep at night, like woken up out of the middle of the night when they have something to tell me, or when I'm contemplating something or whatever, that knock comes. It's like, oh, wake up. I call those dope slaps from the universe. And the knocking is it for me. So
I love that. Dope slaps from the universe.
Yes, that's the chapter in my book. Yep. Really? You're not going to listen? All right, here you go again. And we keep learning and learning and learning until we get it, right? So those opportunities. So it was 2005, and I I'd been on this spiritual, I believe we're all on a spiritual journey from the time we're born, and more consciously and intentionally, I had been on this path. And so I was open to things. I didn't know about shared death experiences yet. In 2005, I was in Atlanta visiting my grandma Rose, and I'm the eldest of 8 grandchildren. And, they would laugh and say, oh yeah, I'm like the out there one. And my grandmother had been in and out of hospice, or hospice had been in and out of her home for the past 2 years. So every time we were saying goodbye to Grandma Rose, it was like, all right, it became a joke, because then we'd see her again for something else. So this time though, she was really sick, like the end was near. And I was supposed to leave Atlanta, where she was, to fly back to New York, Massachusetts. And something ignited me to stay a few extra days. There was just, I forget if there was a reason or if there was like an inkling. So I ended up staying. And one night, the hospice nurse and myself, actually, it was the night of July 26th, going into July 27th. The hospice nurse and myself were in my grandmother's, she had a condo, we were there, and there was a knock at the door. We had called my uncle to come to the house just like 2 minutes before that. And then there was a knock at the door, and we looked at each other because we weren't expecting anyone. I don't know. It was nighttime. I don't remember what time it was, but we weren't expecting anyone. And I looked at her, and I knew when I went to the door, there was going to be no one there. And I was in for the ride. I was like, wow, this is really cool. As loud as day, a knock. So I went to the door, I opened it, no one was there, I closed it, right? Okay, keep that on the shelf.
Okay.
Then my aunt and uncle came, my other aunt and uncle came, we were all there. At some point, everyone went to sleep. And the hospice nurse was still awake. My aunt was lying in my grandmother. She had a huge king size bed. My aunt was lying on the king size bed. And I was sitting at the hospital bed, which was in my grandmother's bedroom. And I was sitting by the bed and holding her hand. And like telepathically, just like, Grandma, it's okay. I love you. We love you. Just all the things. You've been such a matriarch, all of the things. And I was holding her hand, and then I remember I put my head down. It was getting late. I think it was late. This is in the middle of the night. And I put my head down, and I knew that as long as I was holding her hand, she wasn't going to let go. I knew it. Right. And that knowing kept on getting stronger of like, it's time. So the hospice nurse was, I don't know where she was, but at some point she came in, she was sitting in the chair, she was awake. And I remember, as long as she was going to be awake, I felt okay going to sleep, like getting in the bed for a little while, because I was like, tell us when she's like really at the end, right? So I let go of her hand, knowing that that the hospice nurse, or trusting that the hospice nurse was going to like wake us all up or get us all up when it was time. And I got into bed and I closed my eyes, and I don't know how long after I closed my eyes it was. So I was lying down, and I went into this state of I don't know if I was asleep or in that state between wakefulness and sleep. And I had this vision almost. It felt like a vision, yet it was real. Like I could reach out and touch what was happening. And there were people in a ballroom. There was like a big ballroom with huge ceilings, and there were tons of people there. And these people were familiar. They were old relatives and friends, but not in their old state. They were very youthful, and they were all dressed in colorful ball gowns. The women were in these ball gowns, and there was a party, and they were super excited, and they were all gathered, and there was anticipation in the air. And I could feel this. It wasn't, like a hazy and foggy dream. It was crisp. And I looked down, and no one had any feet. No one had feet. They were kind of like hovering and floating above the floor. So no one had feet. And the energy started to build in the room, and the people kind of parted, and I felt my grandfather. They were parting from my grandfather and this angel to come down. And I believe, I can't remember if there was two presences, like two angelic presences, and I didn't see them, but I knew that that's what it was. Or one. I can't remember if it was my grandmother and his, but what I remember is the people parted, and my grandfather and this presences, angelic presences, were going up like this aisle. And as they got to the top, the energy built. And as they got to the top, it was like they were on, it was almost like when someone goes up to a pulpit, or in Judaism, we call it the bima, or, like wasn't quite a stage, but it was raised. And they were going up. And it kept building and building and building. And I heard someone say to me, "Get up now." And they said, "Get up now," as there was a sense of reaching, as they were reaching down. They were reaching down with my grandfather. He was participating in this, and they were reaching down. And I heard at the same time, "Get up now." And I popped my eyes open. I shot up. I looked around the room. The hospice nurse had indeed fallen asleep. And I looked at my grandmother. Her eyes were wide open. She was like, it was like a moment of pure lucidity, yet not, I don't know what was going on with her, but I shouldn't say I don't know what was going on with her. She was purely like, her eyes were wide open, and she was taking her final breaths. And I ran to get my uncle, because I remember thinking, oh, I can just be with her while she takes her final breath. But I knew that my uncle really wanted to be there. So I ran to get my uncle and my aunt to come in the room. So that was the first, what happened. Any questions before I go on to the second?
Yes. So her eyes were open, and I assume by the time you got back, she had left.
She had taken her final breath as I ran to get my uncle. Yeah.
Yep.
She was still very much in the room, but as soon as the voice said, "Get up now," and I opened my eyes, she was in the process. She had started. Her eyes were like wide open, but not like wide open and vacant. Like she was like starting, like the life.
So your sense was that grandfather was there, and he was picking her up out of her physical body and saying, "Come on, sweetheart, it's time to go to a party."
Yeah, something like that. I mean, they were there to welcome her, truly. And again, he wasn't alone. He was with this guardian angel or angels. Yeah, and
What?
reached down
Yeah. So what was your sense of their presence and why were they there?
to welcome her. It was to welcome her and to help her transition, like to welcome her and be right there and be there to greet her right then.
And did I hear that correctly, that you sensed them rather than saw them?
Yes, I sense them, but it's like a sense where the people I saw, like that was like I saw what colors they were wearing, and blues and yellows, like I saw. Mm-hmm. My grandfather, I knew it was him, and the presences I knew, and there's vision and seeing involved, but it wasn't what we ascribed to seeing. There was a vision, but it wasn't seeing.
Yep.
Okay.
And what was your grandfather dressed in?
I don't remember what my grandfather was dressed in. I don't remember because I wasn't seeing, right? It was more like vision, like imprint. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, I would call it that there's an energetic signature that is involved with people.
Yes.
And they're there, and it's Grandpa, but it isn't exactly like what we say. Oh, yeah, Scott's got a purple shirt on and got glasses. And,
Right.
And striped suit or whatever he was dressed in. Did he have feet?
Yeah, I mean, he and the presences. Now that I've just started talking about this more. I believe there was two. There was he was being helped, and my grandmother. There was definitely her greeting guide angel that was there with my grandfather. He was not doing this by himself.
Yep, got it.
Yeah, that was in 2005, July 27th, which is interesting because she was born on December 27th. I was born January 27th. My mom was born August 27th. Yeah, something about that 27.
Yeah, there's something about that.
Yeah.
Okay, your second SDE.
Okay.
Lay it on us.
So, and also one more thing, the reason why that intro was relative.
Hang on just a second. I'm sorry, but there's somebody at the door.
Oh.
Hang on, I'm going to
stop. Are they knocking at the door?
Just as Felice was finishing up her SDE, I heard a knock at the door. I'm not kidding you. I went to investigate it, and it turns out it was a young man representing a tree trimming company selling his services. That the importance of the knock came up during the first SDE now has my attention. Stay tuned for Felice's second SDE and how the knock became more relevant. Okay, what was that other thought that you were going to share with us?
Yeah, so I wanted to clarify about this presence, right? Because this presence that was other than my own, that was merged in with that I am presence of me. I never quite knew how to express that as a being of light, as an angel. I don't know. I just knew that it was this light, and it didn't have form. It was a presence, and that the signature, if you will, the energy, the vibration, the frequency of that presence. You asked me how long I've heard it, right? I have gone into meditations where I've called upon that presence, and I've asked of that presence to be with me, and that presence has come in in communion, like to guide me or to share information. And it has its own signature, its own feeling.
Yep.
And, I don't know that, the question of how long have I been receiving messages from it? It's not like it was a year straight. I mean, it still comes and goes. So I can't really define it necessarily with when I came back, and I was super open to receiving and to being in this frequency and in the field. I kept hearing information, and the information that I was hearing was like at different vibrational frequencies. Is whatever my frequency and vibrational state was a match for, is where the information would come from. And I remember the summer after my accident asking, who is this? And I was writing, and I said, when I said, who is this? I heard Akasha. And I had sort of heard of the Akashic records. Like, I didn't really know what they were. I mean, it wasn't like in my common vernacular. So I looked it up, and I thought it was just really interesting. Like, there's no way I would just like pull that out of thin air. Like, it wasn't in my reality. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and I've had the sensation, depending on where I'm at in my life or what I'm going through, of being able to access information again from different energy frequencies. And there's a difference. I could feel the difference when I'm in a really pure state vibrationally, what I'm attuning to, and when I'm, I don't want to say in a denser state, just where my energy's at. There's a difference in where the information comes from. And it's all really helpful, informative information about life and death and those spaces between. So I wanted to clarify that.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Akasha. Coming to visit.
And then I heard Akashiraya. It was really fascinating. I was like, and then I ended up taking these courses to be able to funnel like all of this stuff. Like, that's great, but how do I like be able to channel it to be helpful and of service, right?
Why don't you tell us about your second SDE?
Okay.
Well,
to share, before I move on, I want to say the reason that I said about, being the one that was out there, the oldest child of 8 or whatever, that was how, my family's really glad that I was there. It's like everyone wants to be present when a loved one passes, and it made sense that I was there and had this experience for my cousins and for my relatives. And so there's that. So my second my second SDE. So as you know, I had this near-death experience in 2015, and my dad, my dad passed on March 18th of this year. And before he passed, in the months leading up to him passing, he had Alzheimer's. And it was interesting. He had a kind of Alzheimer's that he still recognized and knew all of us, like by name. He knew who the family was. And before his memory started getting really, or before it got worse, I wanted to have the conversations with him, like, what do you think happens, Dad? Or what do you feel about what happens on the other side? Just to have that conversation and share from as much as I could that was comfortable for him. And whereas my first shared death experience was on kind of the other side of the veil, right? With them reaching down. What happened was my dad, in the day that he passed, he woke up in the morning. Hospice had come in. The family was there. My sister was flying in from Colorado, and he woke up. He said good morning to my brother. Like, he was super alert. And as the day went on, no, he had a hard night. And my mom was worried. And he woke up, and throughout the day, he started to progressively get worse. And he had one dose of morphine in the morning, and not over, not too much, right? And as the day went on, kind of, right? So as the morphine almost started to fade, he kept pointing to the corner of the room.
Yeah.
Yep. He kept pointing to the left. And then he would point and jolt back, like, and look at us. And then he would point to the corner of the room and kind of drift off and look and stare. And he would kept just picking his hand up like this. And he would point, and then he would jolt back and look at us. And because of my near-death experience and my previous experience, I said, and he wasn't able to verbally communicate, like, Dad, who's there or what, right? I said, Daddy, it's okay. They're here to help you. Your physical body is in the bed, and they're here to greet you. It's okay. And I named the relatives, right? I named his parents, my grandparents. I named, other relatives that had passed. And this went on for a little while. And that seemed to kind of, I don't know, that seemed to kind of settle him down, right? To the jolting back. And then at some point, my daughter and I were in the room, and we both could swear we heard him say, all set. We looked at each other like, did he just say that? Right? So that was that. And as the day went on, he started reaching, reaching towards the corner, right? Like reaching up, and remembering what my grandmother's, the experience with my grandmother, right? Like that reaching down. I mean, it was like this full circle experience. So he was reaching up. And at some point, he had a caretaker at the house. We were going to have her go. So she went in to make sure he was comfortable, and we all left the room, and he starts to get a little agitated in his body. So my brother went in, my mom went in, and because her presence soothed him, and he had started to take his final breaths, right? So we all went back in the room. My mom put her head on his chest, and he did that last inhale in, and you could see, I mean, he was gone, right? But you can see. So we all went in. My brother and mom were in right when it started to happen, and then I went in, and my daughters went in, and we were saying, before that, we were saying, it's okay, we're all here, and we named all of us. Although my sister was still on the plane, the plane had just landed. We mentioned her name. We mentioned her husband's name, her kids' names, like all just named it before he left. Like, we're all here. It's okay. You're going to be okay. So then he started to leave, and you could tell it was happening. And the sense of him being bigger than his body and out of his body was so familiar to me from my own near-death experience. And I was able to sense him and see him and feel him. And it wasn't from the vantage point of me, it was his energetic signature. It was clearly him out of his body looking down. And because of my own experience, again, I knew that he could hear everything that was going on. So we all held hands around his body, and the hospice nurse was there too, Robert, who was amazing. And I said, Daddy, it's okay. We're here. We know you can hear us. We know you can see us. We're going to be okay. Really talking to him, and you're going to go off and do your soul thing, whatever you need to do. And we'll be here when and if you want to come back to talk with us, to give us signs and symbols and let us know you're here. We're here when you feel ready for that, if you feel ready for that. And we love you, and continue to do that. And at some point, there was kind of a dissipation of that energy. My sister had come by that point to be able to be with his body and his presence in the room. And it was pretty remarkable. It was pretty remarkable to have the experience from the other side, and to be able to, in my extended sensory awarenesses outside of the five senses that we all have, that we're all capable of accessing, those other senses, to have that circle, to have that reaching down and the reaching up. It was like the veil disappeared. It was really profound. And also how much peace it gives the soul to be able to look down, to see their loved ones, acknowledging that they could hear and know, still, like that they could hear and see what's going on below, right? It's a really beautiful, important, sacred moment that we can bring consciousness to.
Could you get a sense of how your dad was doing as he left his physical body?
Yeah, well, we laugh, we say his regular nurse wasn't there. So the nurse that was, went in to ensure he was comfortable wasn't as soft, let's say, as his regular nurse. So she was a little rougher. He was like, yeah, I'm out. Right. When we had heard him being in discomfort, he was like, I am all the way out. Right. Like, get me out of here. The sense that I had from him, there was like I'm like out here now. So it felt like there was a adapting to it a bit, like, cause he was fully out, he had been in and out, yet when you're fully out, you're like, oh. So I had a sense he was not confused, but just, like there was
that was easy.
Yeah, like, I'm out here. And that we could see him and we're talking to him, like being seen when you're in the unseen, and being known. Like there was, takes away the worry of the soul, like, oh my gosh, my loved one's gonna, like, this is it. And I don't want to have to worry about them, because then they're held down, right? So there was a sense of, I'm here now, and the following week, in the Jewish tradition, we sit Shiva for 7 days, and we had a Lubavitch rabbi who had known my dad for many years, who was very knowledgeable in the Kabbalistic tradition. And that was such a gift. And my dad, there was a few instances of during that week, there's two things that happen. I know you didn't ask this question, but okay.
Go for it. If I don't like it, I'll cut it out.
Okay. So there was a few days into the sitting Shiva, I had a full visceral experience while I was asleep that my dad walking into the house dressed like he was going to temple to attend his own Shiva, like as if to say, I'm here, I'm with you all. Like he was fully there. Again, it's like, a visitation is different than a dream in the sense like it's not hazy, it's not fuzzy, it's like visceral. It's visceral and it's like specific, and you can like touch it almost, and it enlivens your senses. And yeah, so that happened. He like walked in. I was like, oh, Dad's here, right? So that happened, and also it was Friday it was exactly a week after he passed at the time that his passing was called, like at the time of the death time, whatever that's called. And I went through like, where do I want to be? I have to make this sacred and I have to make this special and da, da, da. Do I want to be at the beach? Because they live at the beach. Do I want to walk on the board? Like, what? And I was like, you know what? Just chill out, Felice. Go for a walk. So I left the house. I went for a walk, and out of nowhere, and it was chilly. It was foggy. It was cold. And I mean, I was in a down jacket, and I heard in my left ear a bumblebee, like buzzing in my ear, like bzzz.
Yep.
And I looked at my watch, and it was the precise time, that it was called, like,
Yeah, exactly. 7 days later.
Exactly. And again, it's, time is irrelevant in that realm. It's just that when they come to us in ways that we know and understand, right? So we know and understand in our waking life. I mean, we understand multidimensional time and reality, space, no time, space, and also, that more linear time. So that was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. So earlier in this interview, you said
The knocking.
the knock.
So
let's take that and put it on the shelf. Time to bring back.
Okay. So knocking. So the knocking happened with my grandmother about a month ago. I was awakened in the night by a knock, like a loud knock. And I had just asked my dad before I went to sleep. I said, because for a while I kind of felt him off. Like I didn't feel his presence so near. I felt like he was off at soul school. And so about a month ago, I asked to be shown a sign or some indication that he's present, right? I mean, there's a part of a soul that's always present, right? And then there's the going off to soul school. So there was a knock as loud as day that night. And I woke up and I journaled and I wrote. I'll have to go back to see what came through, because in my conscious mind, I wake up, I don't remember what I wrote, right? So then the other day, so that was the second time, that was the knock. And then the other day I was making a decision and there was a knowing that I had, yet I wasn't listening to the knowing. Again, there is those things, that voice of the soul, that intuition, that knowing that we have, that we come up with all kinds of reasons and excuses and pretend we don't know it. And I had the knock again. Like I had the knock, like pay attention, because I made the other decision. And it was like, oh, pay attention to this. So I heard that knock again. Yeah. In the middle of the night, as loud can be.
And I hope you paid attention.
Well, I still, what I'm paying attention to now is that even though I've had these experiences and even though I know better, I'm paying attention to what it brought to my awareness is why is it that when I have a strong knowing, I don't listen to it. And that's my work to do, right? Trust, deep trust.
So who was there to pick up your dad? Who was up in the corner with the reaching down?
I couldn't see them. That I didn't have so much a sense of. I didn't have so much a sense of. I did feel, again, we've had many people pass on that side of the family in the last, especially a few years. So I named his sister and his nephew and both of his sisters. And so, and my grandparents, I felt my grandparents. I felt those guides, I believe that we each have, assigned angels and guides. So I couldn't really see that. I wasn't as clear on, yet I could sense something there.
Something there.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly who it was.
So these have been two extraordinary shared death experiences. Thank you for sharing them with us. And for those of you watching, stick around. I've got a couple of interesting things I think you'll want to hear. And to wrap this up, Felice, again, how do people get a hold of you? Where's your website?
groundedillumination.com. And something that I hear to share is that truly there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear. Yeah. There's nothing to fear. That fear of, what is it? People have a fear of public speaking and a fear of dying. And
Snakes.
What's that?
Snakes. That's the third one.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Well, that fear of death, there's truly nothing to fear. And I hope that sharing these experiences in some way can comfort or inspire or land for someone in a way that it lessens any worry or doubt or fear about it.
Well, just feeling your energy as you're telling the story should help alleviate people's fears and concerns. So thank you, Felice, for sharing your stories, and we'll see you, everybody. I found the balancing of SDE quite extraordinary. One reaching up. I think that's the universe showing us its great heart. And just to be clear, these are my viewpoints, but that's why you watch the Afterlife Files, to gain perspective by using more than one lens with which to view this rich information. So, to have grandfather reaching down shows us the love that transcends the boundary of life and death. Not only that, but grandfather has celestial help with 2 angels on his side. Nice work. Those are great escorts. The second SDE with Felice's father reaching up completes the circle. It shows us that we can see and recognize those loved ones in the non-physical there to help us. It's clear they communicated with their father for days before his transition to assure and comfort him that all would be well. I also think that Felice's NDE, which you witness as part 1 of this interview, helped her to understand the importance of verbally communicating with her father after he left his physical body, knowing that he would be able to hear and understand what the people in the room were saying and feeling. Lastly, Felice had the experience of her father coming to visit the assembled during his Shiva and 7 days after his transition. After death communication is real and it can take many forms, from the vision to the bumblebees in his ear in cold weather. So there was a knock whenever Felice needed to pay attention to what was going on in her life. Okay, here's the cool part. And I'm quoting Felice now because she sent me an email after we did this interview. It said, "After the interview with you," meaning me, Scott, "I went to a shiatsu session where my practitioner shared with me that she felt a lot of tree energy flowing up through me in both reaching up, opening up, and receiving the light, and calling for the stiff places in my body to become less rigid so I could root down like a tree into the earth." So I took that to mean so that she could become more grounded. Remember, that showed up in the interview, that she needed to be more grounded. And so, returning back to the email, when I got to my car after my appointment, the first song that came on the radio was "Stand Like an Oak" by Rising Appalachia. And the opening lyrics of this song are, "Stand like an oak, an aspen and alder. It's in you, don't falter. And if so, then I got you. Fake it, walk taller. Anything that makes you feel smaller, leave it by the angels of the water." You can't make this up. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment. You can find the Afterlife Files on all podcast streaming apps: Apple, Google, Spotify, Audible, the lot. Pay us a visit at neardeathmeditations.com for information on our albums, workshops, and retreats. Bye now, and thanks for being with us here at the Afterlife Files.